Please stand by. Good day, everyone, and welcome to this Policies for Pregnant and Parenting Youth in or Exiting Substitute Care conference call. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I'd like to turn things over to Ms. Cynthia Peterson. Please go ahead.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Cynthia Peterson, and I am the Out-of-Home Care and Youth Program Manager for the Child Welfare Information Gateway. And I'm also the Project Coordinator for the National Resource Center for In-Home Services. On the behalf of the NRC for In-Home Services, welcome to Part 1 of our three-part series on pregnant and parenting teens who are in or who have exited substitute care. The topic for today's discussion will be on policy and practice issues that impact this vulnerable population. At the top of your right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a feature that allows you to raise your hand if you want to be recognized or for you to type in a question for the presenters. Feel free to use these features at any time. We will leave time at the end of the presentation to ask for questions or discussion. At that time, phone lines will be open, so feel free to simply begin talking. But we will also acknowledge any raised hands or written questions at that time as well. I would like to introduce the presenters for today's webinar. They represent services that support pregnant and parenting youth from prevention to family service systems across the spectrum of prevention, early childhood intervention, in-home family preservation, out-of-home placement, and programs for runaway and unaccompanied minors. Our host and lead presenter is Lisa Diano. Lisa is the Project Director for the National Resource Center for In-Home Services. Lisa has 25 years of child welfare experience as an attorney, trainer, and program administrator. Before joining the University of Iowa School of Social Work, Lisa was Best Practice Project Director for the Inspector General of the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. The Inspector General has been working to strengthen Illinois' program of services for teen parents in foster care for the past 20 years. We also have joining us Edie Winkle. Edie is a Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator for the Friends National Resource Center for Community-Based Child Abuse Prevention. Edie has a master's degree in social work with the emphasis on child development. She's an experienced trainer and has worked in public and private agencies as well as providing training and technical assistance to states on community-based child abuse prevention. Next, we have Clay Fink. Clay is a program supervisor with the National Resource Center for Youth Services. He coordinates projects through the NRC for Youth Development, and he is a national trainer who specializes in, among other issues, youth development, independent living, and permanency for adolescents. Clay is also a licensed clinical professional counselor with a Master's of Education with 17 years experience with youth and foster care. Our next presenter will be T.C. Cassidy. T.C. is the program supervisor for the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center, also known as RATAC. She is based out of the University of Oklahoma. T.C. has extensive experience in the field of youth services and has worked in both direct and supervisory positions. In her role at RATAC, she provides resources and training and provides technical services for runaway and homeless youth grantee agencies. Last but certainly not least, we have youth presenters who will be introduced in a few minutes. Again, welcome. This is the first in a series of 3 webinars. We have today's webinar. We have a part 2, which will be held on Wednesday, November 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The title for that webinar is Innovative Programs for Pregnant and Parenting Teens in or Exiting Care. Part 3 will be held on Wednesday, November 30th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that webinar will focus on programs for teen fathers and legal issues. Want to go ahead and go over today's objectives. We want to be able to identify who we are and why we have come together to discuss this important topic. We want to discuss the unique needs and challenges of pregnant and parenting youth in or exiting the child welfare system. We want to learn about the policies and practices to better address the complex needs of pregnant and parenting youth in care. And we also want to provide a helpful resource to support the various systems serving pregnant and parenting youth. Teen pregnancy.
Excuse me, Cynthia. I think we're not getting the slides advanced.
Okay. Sorry about that. Technical issue there. Framing the issue. Teen pregnancy and parenting pose significant developmental challenges for youth, and even more so for youth who are in or recently exited substitute care. The children of youth in substitute care may or may not be in the custody of the state. In either case, family-serving systems across the spectrum should have a well-thought-out system of support to support current and former foster teen as they transition successfully to adulthood. We need a system that supports them in their roles as parents, leading to positive outcomes for both their children and themselves. What I would like to do now is introduce Edie Winkle, and she is going to talk to us about the Friends National Resource Center for Community-Based Abuse and Prevention.
Hello, everyone. As soon as I get control of the mouse, I will forward my slide. And I'm just going to talk today a little bit. First, I want to let everybody know who Friends is and the work that we do. We think not everybody on the call is as familiar with us. And so what I would like to do is just talk a little bit about Friends. We are a part of the Training and Technical Assistance Network that is a service of the Children's Bureau, and we operate under a cooperative agreement through the Chapel Hill Training Outreach Project, Inc. We have several formal partners that we work with that include the Child Welfare League of America, Circle of Parents, the National Implementation Research Network, Human Systems Dynamics, and Independent Living Resources. Cynthia, can I have control?
It says here that you have control.
It's not letting me advance. So, CPCAP is an acronym that stands for Community-Based Child Abuse Prevention, and it refers to specific types of child abuse prevention programs that exist in every state in the United States. Those are programs that focus on primary and secondary prevention, which I'll get into a little bit more here in just a minute. I either need somebody to advance the slides or I need to be given control.
The slide is advanced.
Edie, this is Clay. Did you do to show your screen?
It's not even giving me the option. Here it comes now. Now I just was given the option to show my own screen. But I don't have the slides up.
Now we just tried to give you keyboard and mouse again.
Yeah, sorry, it's keyboard and mouse control.
Can someone please just advance her slides for her so that we can keep moving?
Cynthia, I'm giving it back to you. Can you show my screen, Cynthia?
Yes, I will.
Okay, excellent. Wonderful. I'm on what legislation supports. It's slide 7. We need to go back one. The legislation that supports CPCAP is the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which is fondly referred to as CAPTA. It was originally enacted in 1974 and has been through the process several times in the last few years, 37 years to be exact. We were most recently reauthorized and amended on December 10th of 2010, and that is part of what brought into play some new target populations for our organization that fund through CPCAP, and part of the reason why we're actively participating in this call today. Next slide, please. The purpose of CPCAP is really to support community-based efforts in prevention of child abuse and neglect This includes the coordination and support of existing efforts. It includes actively providing child abuse prevention counsels, and really looking for ways to strengthen and support families that maybe fall into those gaps that are not served by other organizations. And like I said before, we are meant to serve, provide services in primary and secondary prevention only. Next slide, please. Primary prevention are activities that are targeted toward the community at large. These are those things that you see, like the car seat installation activities often at hospitals or fire departments, or public awareness campaigns about putting fences around pools, public education campaigns around shake and baby, those types of things. These are meant to impact everybody in the community and just educate them and work to prevent child abuse and neglect prevention in those areas. These are not necessarily families that have ever been identified as potentially at risk, but just the community as a whole. Now, secondary prevention is activities that are targeted towards families that do have risk factors. Some of those risk factors that are identified within the program instructions and legislation are around substance abuse, teen parents, parents of special needs children, single parents, and low-income families. These services include parent education classes that target these high-risk parents, respite care for children with disabilities, home visiting programs for new parents. It can really run a wide gamut of services that are available. Now, there is a third kind of prevention out there, and that's called tertiary prevention. And this is not an area that CPCAP is allowed to fund in. And these are families who are already known to the system who have an open child abuse and neglect case. So we are meant to fill the gaps of those families who have not yet gotten to that point. And so this is important when we're working with youth that are possibly in out-of-home care that are considering parenting themselves, because just because they're in care for actions of their parents does not mean that we can't serve them as pregnanting or new parents, as long as they're not, that action hasn't resulted in their own child being removed from their custody. So that's a very important distinction that we want to make sure we get out there. We also don't care if families have juvenile court cases. Those don't impact whether or not they qualify for our services. Next slide, please. And like I just said before, youth in foster care that are pregnant or parenting are eligible for services as long as their child is not in care. Unaccompanied homeless youth are eligible even if they have an open juvenile case. Chafee youth that have aged out but are in need of supportive services and prevention are also eligible for services. So getting to know Chafee coordinators is an important piece of the puzzle as well. So what does this mean? It means that CPCAP is really working to better identify youth that are possibly adult former victims of child abuse and neglect or unaccompanied homeless youth. These were two new target populations that were placed into CAPTA when it was reauthorized in December of last year. And so there is new efforts on the part of CPCAP to really do outreach to these particular groups. We know we're already serving some of these populations and maybe just aren't asking the question, but we also know that we need to be asking some new questions and partnering with some new non-traditional partners in order to get these eligible people into our services. So that means we need to develop some new referral sources. We need to identify those families we're already being served and make sure that we're making the proper referrals for them. And then we also have to begin to think about the service populations in a new and different way. Chafee youth are a really good example of that, because typically they're in custody, they have an open child welfare case. They would not have necessarily been someone in the past that had typically come to the attention of CPCAP and been referred for our services. However, as long as their child's not in care, they're a great candidate, because we know that those particular young people are likely at high risk for abuse and neglect of their own children. The same for unaccompanied homeless youth. That is not typically an organization that we have outreach to before, and we're really looking to build some new bridges so we can move forward there. Now, some examples of typical CPCAP services, just to let people know what those are. Excuse me. Parenting education classes. Lots of the states provide support in this way. They offer support and education in areas such as attachment, nurturing, discipline, and a wide gamut of other areas. This is really going to allow parents to understand what is it that's within those normal bounds, what are those things that they can expect from their children, and how can they be prepared to address those things. We also often see parenting support groups funded through this money. This is great, especially for young parents, because it gives them the opportunity to network and receive support from peers that are often going through the exact same issues as what they're addressing, and it helps to build up that informal and formal social network that we know is so important to really becoming successful as a parent. We also often see home visitation programs, and this is really important, I think, for new and young parents. It provides in-home resources and supports that are often not available otherwise. It can include modeling of how to, dress and bathe the baby, how do you feed. Concrete tools or toys are often provided. Sometimes the home visitor brings them and is even able to leave some of those resources with the family they might not able to afford otherwise. And the nice thing about most home visitation programs is that they can vary in degrees of frequency based on what the family needs. We know some families need a lot of support, especially at the beginning, but then we can begin to back off. Others maybe are in crisis and need a support for a longer period of time. And most often the home visitation programs are able to tailor their services to really meet the families where they're at. So one of the things we just want to make sure is that folks are aware of CPCAP within their communities. If you're not, I encourage you to visit www.friendsnrc.org. We have a map there that lists the CPCAP contact for every state in the country. And so if this is not an organization you're already partnering with, I really encourage you to go there and check them out, find out who it is that is funding those services, and find out how you can be involved. I also want to point out another resource at supportingebhv.org, which is a wealth of information around different evidence-based home visitation programs around the country that are currently being evaluated by the Children's Bureau. And there's some really great information coming out that many of you will be interested in that really helps in the home visitation realm. So at this point, I'm going to be passing it on to Lisa Diano.
Right.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. And Edie, while we're doing that, actually we have a question that came in on the chat that thought that would be for you, which is to ask whether the CPCAP services, can they use referrals in the community for families that aren't eligible for example, who need tertiary prevention and can't be served? What kind of things do they do to refer families?
Sure. Actually, often organizations that receive CPCAP funding are receiving funding from other sources and maybe can even serve those tertiary families. They just can't do it through CPCAP. If they can't serve those families, most of them have a good understanding of what's available in the community and actively refer those families on to other organizations that can serve them. So I would encourage them to, and if we find out, that that's not going on, that's a place we'd love to strengthen if we hear about that.
This is Lisa. The National Research Center for In-Home Services has also been doing a nationwide assessment of in-home child welfare services. And when we ask state managers what helps make those systems successful, they do point to child abuse prevention and family support services. So even though they might not be serving the same kids, the resources, for example, that the prevention services develop in the communities are considered really critical to all the families that are being served in the child welfare system. So this is Lisa Diano again, and I'm introducing our new resource center. The NRC for In-Home Services is a service of the Children's Bureau. We are part of the Training and Technical Assistance Network. We provide training and technical assistance to states and tribes regarding promising and effective alternatives to out-of-home care. And our goal is to build the capacity of states and tribes to protect children in their homes, which means that we look at things broader than just services that are provided in the home. The services can be provided in community settings, in clinical office settings, as long as they're supporting keeping the children in the home. Our core value is that the best place for children to grow up is with their families, and that safe solutions can often be found in partnerships with families and with communities, so that children can stay home while their families are offered supportive services. And that these values apply as well to the children of youth who are in foster care or who are exiting care. I think another thing to say is that in-home services is really not just services, but it's an approach to an overall system of care for families. Families need different levels of support at different times, and in order to keep children safe, we need to be providing that kind of support in the right intensity and at the right time. So what does this all mean in terms of in-home services in the context of teen parents and care? Well, first of all, let's start with a little bit of law. Parenting youth in foster care have the same rights as adult parents. Now, you notice that our slide says in theory, because as a matter of fact, very few states have specific statutes regarding parenting youth in care. The appellate cases that have looked at this area do cite the same constitutional cases that involve adult parents, and basically the general law across the country is that minor parents do have a right to care and custody of their children, absent a finding that they have committed abuse or neglect. And if there is such a finding, then they are required to have the same processes and protections that an adult parent would have, which includes in-home services to prevent removal, if those services are reasonable, shelter hearings, and all the other protections provided in federal and state law. One of the issues that comes up is, okay, a child in care has a baby. Do we need to take custody of that child in order to be able to provide an increased board rate, or be able to help provide services for that child? And the answer to that is no. Federal regulations and statutes are clear that the youth parent is entitled. The place that is taking care of the youth is entitled to increased board rate, and the child does not have to be legally removed in order for those payments to be increased. Now, in terms of what are the statutory duties of states' child welfare systems to the children of youth in care, well, they're not in care. And so we've put it here on the slide, guidance from the Administration of Children and Families Child Welfare Policy Manual, which says that good social work practice suggests that the minor parent's case plan is going to include the needs of their child, and that those child's needs and interests be looked at during the 6-month review hearings and permanency hearings. But the state is not required to have a case plan for that child who's not in foster care. And I think that last line, the child is not in foster care. So it's really important when we think about whose family is this to serve, because it comes up again and again in state practice. If the child is the child of a parent in foster care, isn't that just the child welfare system's responsibility? And I think it's pretty clear that it's a joint responsibility, and that parents certainly, just as a result of being a minor, should not be excluded from services that would be available to other parents who might come into contact with the child welfare system, or who would just be at-risk families in the community. Now, the parenting teens in care do have rights, and there is an obligation, a legal obligation of the state to provide for their health and education through Title IV-B and Title IV-E requirements. And we've highlighted that in particular because, as we'll see in a minute, teens in foster care who end up with having a child, and particularly who have multiple children, are at very high risk of not finishing their education. And the law requires that they be in school full time, so there needs to be efforts made by the state to assist in that process. I'm going to stop and look at questions here before I move on. The first question is, what types of best practice home visitation models and assessments are you using? And do I know if children of minor parents are disproportionately removed from young parents in comparison to adult parents? Okay, I'm going to answer the second question first because we're going to come back to home visiting. There's some indication, the National Resource Center for Legal and Judicial Issues have been looking at this, and there's some indication from case law that the standards for removal seem to be kind of less strict for kids, for the children of kids in care. And that's not by law, but that's maybe by practice. And so the reason that we know this is that when it comes up in an appellate case, it might be overturned because the standards were different. So I think it's real important to talk about the difference between practice and law. And we're going to come in a couple minutes to so you can get a sense of the proportion of children who, in fact, are removed. We have at least one really good study on that. So the second question about home visiting models, I'm going to wait a little bit later and turn that back over to Edie. And it will also be the subject of our next webinar. Oh, all right. It's time to introduce Clay Fink. Clay, I'm going to have Cynthia turn over control to you.
Okay.
Okay, Clay, I am not seeing you here as a...
Actually, TT and I are in the same place.
Okay, wonderful.
Well, I'm going to go ahead while I'm waiting for that message. As you said, I'm Clay Fink with the National Resource Center for Youth Development. We are a service of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Children's Bureau, member of the Children's Bureau network of TNTA providers, and we're located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Just why don't you go ahead and advance them for me? Thank you. Our primary focus, actually the Children's Bureau Training and Technical Assistance Network is tasked to basically assist states, tribes, and territories in systematic improvement of child welfare services. The network is composed of over 30 organizations with a mission to improve the lives of children and families by providing appropriate and meaningful services. Our primary focus at the Resource Center is to provide TNTA to help jurisdictions in implementing the following federal legislations: the Foster Care Independence Act of 1999, which created the John H. Chafee Foster Care Independence Program, the Education and Training Vouchers Program, which was passed in 2001 and was funded in 2003. We also help with the National Youth and Transition Database, and data collection started then in 2010 with that. We also work with states and tribes and territories on the implementation of the Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act of 2008. Additionally, we will develop and provide technical assistance on other key legislations and priorities that they arise. According to the Fostering Connections and Success and Increasing Adoptions Act, which I'm going to say Fostering Connections from now on, the states are required to have more extensive planning and coordination around health needs of children in care. There are some key components that lend itself towards work with the older youth and the pregnant and parenting youth, and I'm going to highlight just a couple of those. Section 201 in the Continuing Federal Support for Children in Foster Care after age 18. This allows for the protection and requirements currently in place for younger children in foster care to apply to the youth ages 18 to 21. Youth ages 18 to 21 could be placed in a supervised setting in which they still live independently, or they could be placed in a foster home or a group home. States could also extend their adoption assistance and or their guardianship payments on behalf of youth ages 19, 20, or 21. Section 202, helping older youth with successful transition from foster care to independence. This requires child welfare agencies to help youth make this transition to adulthood by requiring that within the 90-day period immediately before they transition from care, whether that be age 18, 19, 20, or 21, that a caseworker and other representatives that are deemed appropriate should help the child develop a personal transition plan. The plan must be detailed, as detailed as the child chooses, and when I say child, I am meaning young adult there, but that's how the language reads, and includes specific options on housing, health insurance, education, local opportunities for mentoring, continuing support services, workforce support, and employment services. This could, if you kind of read between some of those lines, this could include sexual health education and services in the health section of the transition plan, and also encourage caseworkers to distribute or get the youth in touch with agencies that could allow them information on pregnancy, child rearing, STD, HIV, prevention, etc. It also could talk about, at this time, could be consequences to early pregnancy or parenting support. They could also identify ongoing resources for pregnant and parenting youth and their children. Section 203, extending federal training to more staff. This section recognizes the importance of quality workforce and for the child well-being. It expands the availability of federal 4E training dollars to cover training of staff not only in public agencies but in private child welfare agencies, as well as court personnel, attorneys, guardians ad litem, and court-appointed special advocates. 4E training dollars could also be used to train prospective relative guardians in addition to foster and adoptive parents. It would be able to identify different training tools to assist staff and foster care parents to more effectively communicate with their young people regarding sexual health issues, pregnancy, collaborating with community partners to provide education to staff and parents or youth on pregnancy, either the prevention or ongoing pregnancy or parenting concerns, and then allow them opportunities to link into support as well. Section 205, we're talking about developing health oversight and coordination plans. This basically requires states to develop, in coordination and collaboration with their Medicaid agency and in consultation with pediatricians and other experts, a plan for ongoing oversight and coordination of health care services for any child in foster care. The plan must describe how initial and follow-up health screenings would be provided, health needs are identified, and how they're going to be monitored and treated. The medical information will be updated and appropriately shared with providers. This plan must also detail the steps that are or will be taken to ensure continuity of health care services. It would include regular scheduled reproductive health screenings within their coordinated health plan, improving access to family planning services, and could also include counseling on whether that be ongoing stuff regarding pregnancy and parenting or abstinence or birth control, medical treatment. Any of those topics could be under this section. So basically, Foster Connections, this is just a few of the sections, but could provide an avenue for states to think outside of the box so that they could provide the supportive services to those pregnant and parenting young adults. Once again, if you want to go to the next slide, the Resource Center is commissioned to build capacity so that jurisdictions can provide a high quality of services to their youth. And really, as long as youth in the transitional age range are involved, then our Resource Center could be involved in helping those states provide those services and training experiences to get to a point where they are able to hold on to that capacity of their own. With that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to TC.
Cynthia, can you just keep driving the slides for me, please?
Yes.
This is TC Cassidy, and I'm with the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Centers, which is also based out of the University of Oklahoma's outreach in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we are tasked with providing training and technical assistance to programs funded through Department of Health and Human Services, Family and Youth Services Bureau, which I will call FISB from here throughout the call, to 750 programs across the country. Those programs range from basic centers, street outreach programs, maternity group homes, and transitional living programs. Today we're going to focus on the transitional living and maternity group homes specifically. Maternity group homes is a subset of transitional living in terms of legislative authority. And the legislative authority that's tied to Runaway and Homeless Youth is the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act, as amended by 42 U.S. Code, sections 5701 through 5752. The link on your screen will take you, this PowerPoint will be available later after the webinar, and you may also have it now on your computer as well. That link will take you directly to the legislation so that you can read it. I'm going to go over the key points of the scope of services for maternity group home as well as the mandatory services as we go through. Group homes are required, maternity group homes are for youth ages 16 to 21 up to the ages of 22. And youth can stay there for up to 18 months. In extenuating circumstances, they could stay up to 21 months. That would be either young mothers with children or young fathers with children. We also have programs that are serving young couples with children. And some of those young people are working towards either reunifying with a child because their child, the child of the youth, may be in state custody or child welfare custody. If that's the case, maternity group homes can still work with those young people as they work to reunify, as they work towards visitation. So that is a nice place for young people that may have struggled and had a child removed from their care. Our programs can help that young person, even if the young person themselves is not in care. Specifically, Runaway and Homeless Youth programs work with youth that are defined as runaway or homeless, and as such, they are not members of what legislation refers to as systems youth. And by systems youth, we mean youth that are currently in the care or guardianship of a child welfare, Department of Children's Services program, and or youth that are currently in the physical care of a juvenile justice system. Youth may be on probation and still be able to access our services. It can't be a mandatory court-ordered placement. Some of the scope of services are the same as a regular transitional living program, so they're going to get all those services in addition to pregnant and parenting youth, and their children will receive supportive and supervised living arrangements. Our programs have to teach parenting skills. There needs to be appropriate supervision, and appropriate supervision is defined as supervision that will ensure the safety of the youth and their children while they're in one of our programs. There has to be outreach to eligible youth. That can be street-based outreach. It's also outreach to child welfare agencies that may be working with a young person or may have gotten a referral on a young person, but it doesn't rise to the occasion of placing that young person in care. That young person is eligible for our services, and as such, the child welfare agency could refer them to one of our maternity group homes rather than placing them in state care. There has to be a written transitional living plan that addresses health, well-being, and safety of the young person and their dependent or dependents. And That plan is written in conjunction with the young person. It is not the program's plan. It is an individual plan based on what that individual youth and their child needs. Aftercare services are a mandatory service, and aftercare can extend for as long as that young person wants to engage in aftercare. That could mean anything from they want to come back for counseling and supportive services. They want to come back and talk about, okay, now my child is getting ready to go into preschool and I'm not sure how to handle all of the information with Head Start or preschool and get assistance with that. Our programs, for the most part, operate on an open door policy of if a young person moves out before they cap out at that age range of 22, if they need to come back and there's a bed available, then our programs, for the most part, will let that young person come back, just like you would a young person that lived in your home as one of my children or your children. If something happens and they need to come home, most of our programs operate in that way, that home is there if there's space available at all, or we will help find them a place if something happens and they need more help. Confidentiality and consent from the youth on release of records. Even if they are 16 years old in our programs, we need a release from that young person before we release records, unless, of course, it's a court order or subpoena to release those records. We do require that the young person signs that release before we release it. We're not going to depend on a parent that may or may not be involved in that young person's life at that point. Educational opportunities, we work closely with the McKinney-Vento liaisons. Every school district has one. If you don't know who your McKinney-Vento school district liaison is, there is a list available, and that you can get to that from our website, which you have at the end of this workshop as well. And then there's coordination of services to ensure the continuum of care for the special needs of pregnant or parenting youth and their dependents. And that coordination of services piece gets to the collaboration between child welfare systems, the school, public health departments, legal services, especially if they're involved in a custody situation and or a situation where their child is in the care of the state and they're trying to regain custody. We will help make sure that they have access to legal aid or whatever services they need. More mandatory life skills services include life skills, money management, and family budgeting, consumer education, parenting skills. These skills are not just classroom-based, let's hand you a workbook. These are real-life situations for these young people that they're living in, so it's a lot of hands-on work with these young people. Family planning, abstinence, and pregnancy prevention services are also required, as well as health and nutrition, interpersonal skill building. Again, job and education are high priorities, as well as mental health and physical health care for the youth and their children. We also have to provide, all our programs have to provide child care for the dependent children of the youth in our residential programs. If that young person has a child in their care, it is our responsibility to make sure they have access to appropriate child care for their child while the young person is in school, or if that child needs special care, if they're medically fragile or something, then it is our program's responsibility to make sure that child care exists. It doesn't fall on the shoulders of the homeless youth. Transportation services, a lot of our young people have difficulty accessing transportation. Again, that is a mandatory service. We can provide it directly. We can provide bus tokens, arrange cab rides. McKinney-Vento liaisons are responsible for helping us transport kids to school and back. So transportation can be as comfortable as possible for these young people. The definition of homeless youth for maternity group home purposes is any individual who is not more than 21 years of age, so it can be male or female if they are pregnant and or parenting. In the case of a youth seeking shelter in a center under Part A of the Runaway Homeless Youth Act, this is where it will be beneficial to go ahead and pull the Runaway Homeless Youth Act, Section 387. And they cannot be less than the age of 16 for this maternity group home or transitional living funding. The other key part is that it is not possible to live in a safe environment with a relative, and they have no other safe alternative living arrangement for that young person and their child, which means if a parent says, I will take custody of the infant, but the parent can no longer live here, that the young person and their child are both eligible for our programs. They both have to have a safe alternative living arrangement, which they deem to be safe, not somebody else. They get to decide if they are safe in that environment, and if they say to us, I'm not safe here, then we will work with them based on that position that they are not safe there, either because they're afraid they're going to lose custody of their child, or they've been told that there's a possibility that they're couch surfing and they're going to be kicked out if something goes wrong. It's a pay-to-stay situation where if they lose their job, then they will become homeless along with their child. So the safe alternative living arrangement is as broad as we can make it, so that we can make sure young people have the ability to say to us, I am not safe and this is why, and our programs can work with them. And I believe at this point, I turn it back over to Edie or
Lisa.
Lisa.
Yeah. And before I move, I wanted just to ask TC a couple of questions, because it seems as if the maternity groups homes really sort of have a lot of answers to needs. And one of the things that I wanted to know is how do maternity group homes also have within their walls foster youth with a different funding source?
Yes. The majority of our programs operate with child welfare funding. They have multiple funding streams, but most of them also have child welfare funding coming in, so that if, which would be an ideal situation if you had a young person who wasn't in care, but an infant who was, or a child who was, then the child welfare system funding could pay for the infant's placement or the child's placement, and runaway and homeless youth funding could pay for the homeless youth funding, but that would keep that family together rather than splitting them up in different foster homes for the infant and then mom or dad being in one of our programs.
Great. And how many group homes, maternity group homes, are there?
There are 37 maternity group homes that are specifically funded for maternity group home purposes under Family and Youth Services Bureau, along with there are also 225 transitional living programs, and a lot of those also serve pregnant and parenting youth. They just aren't funded just for that purpose, so they can serve other youth that aren't pregnant or parenting as well as pregnant and parenting youth.
So one thing it seems pretty obvious is that if you have a maternity group home, those folks should be sitting at the table,
right? Because
you've got a handle on a lot of this stuff. So I'm going to talk about need. Am I getting an? Is there an echo? I hear an echo on my phone.
I don't hear it, Cynthia.
Great. Okay. So what do we know from the data about, in general, youth in foster care are likely to experience early parenthood. We know from research that early parenthood doubles the risk of dropping out of school and increases the chance of poor or no employment. We have some studies. Actually, many of you are familiar with the Chapin Hall Midwest study, which was a small sample that's been followed longitudinally in 3 states over a number of years. But in addition, Chapin Hall did a big study of over 4,500 Illinois teen parents in care. Now, this was administrative data over the entire period from 1996 to 2000 and something. So just to give you when you look at that number, you know, at any one time, Illinois might have somewhere between 400 and 600 parenting or youth in care, but this is over this long period of time. And what they found was that the average age of the teen parent at the birth of her first child, this is mother, was 17.8 years. I would say that there is there's another source of data from a current group of wards that showed that average age of conception was 16.3 years. So that would put those mothers that are currently in the system a little bit younger. And a third of the young mothers in the Chapin Hall study had given birth by the age of 16, so some really young moms. Nearly a quarter had at least 2 children. Some good news is that female foster youth generally do receive prenatal care during pregnancy. In this study, a full 90%. However, and I know these numbers don't add up to 100, but among those youth who received prenatal care, they joined with another percentage who didn't. 22% either received no prenatal care or they didn't begin until the 3rd trimester. So there's still a ways to go in terms of early identification. 44%, nearly half of young women who parented a child in foster care left care without a high school diploma or a GED, and 27% of the males. And having more than one parent was a significant barrier. In fact, each additional child reduced the odds for a woman of having a high school education or diploma by 45%. So it obviously brings up the need for subsequent pregnancy prevention. Chapin Hall looked at the children of the wards, children of parents in care, and found that 22% of those families had been investigated for child abuse, so a report made and accepted for investigation of child abuse and neglect. 11% had a child placed in foster care, so the other way to look at it is that almost 90% of these young teen moms are parenting and have custody of their kids. Another source of data that's important is the National Survey of Child and Adolescent Well-Being. This is the Wave 5, so 2006, 2007. I think it's a little bit old for us right now because we do have the ETV and some other, Medicaid and other pieces of financial funding, stipends that are available for young people now that we didn't have back then. But from that wave, nearly 2/3 of young adult mothers who came out of foster care were living in poverty. And that was significantly more than other youth who had some contact with CPS. So the National Survey of Child and Adolescent Well-Being just looks at families who've had some contact with Child Protective Services. So having a child really significantly increased the chances that the mom would live in poverty. One last study, and I want to note, you're going to see Illinois a lot, and you might be wondering, how come? Well, Chapin Hall has done a lot of this work, and they are in Illinois, but also Illinois has been operating under a consent decree from a lawsuit that was filed, a class action lawsuit that was filed way back in the late 80s on behalf of pregnant and parenting teen in foster care. And so there's been about 20 years of experience in Illinois in tracking these young people, developing services, and so as a result, not only do we have a lot of information, but also they've made a good study population. Karen Budd and her colleagues from DePaul University have looked intensively at 49 teen moms in foster care and focused on their parenting functioning. And found some worrisome information: high average levels of unrealistic parenting beliefs, high mean scores for child abuse risk, low scores on the quality of parent-child interactions. Interestingly, only 10% of the moms reported clinically elevated levels of emotional distress, and I think that's a really important thing. It's consistent with some other studies. For example, the NSCA, that Child and Adolescent Wellbeing study, found that young parents showed significantly less clinical mental health symptoms than non-parents. So there are some, if we think from a strengths perspective, there are some really positive things in meaning of life and emotional good feelings that come from also being a parent. The mean number of people in the moms network was relatively small, but generally moms were relatively well satisfied with support networks. The service needs for young parents in care look an awful lot like the things that TC has been talking about that maternity homes do for kids. And I'm not going to read through all of them, but I want to mention that obviously services need to be targeted to the child as well as the young parent. That social support still is a key component. And I want to mention legal advocacy. As we've said, there's one thing to have a law in your state that gives you the same rights and other things to get access to it. And it's also true sometimes that foster youth are denied benefits that other parents would get. So it's important to have both trained attorneys and guardian ad litem who can think. Sometimes guardian ad litem cannot represent a mom or dad in both their parent role and their youth role, but it's something that agencies or jurisdictions need to consider. We've got 2 questions I'm going to check here and see. Besides Illinois, do I know of any other state child welfare agency, local jurisdiction, or tribe that are tracking the number of pregnant and parenting youth in care? I don't know the answer to that question. I think that California seems to be more on top of it, but we haven't. I haven't seen that data. So I'm going to now introduce our youth, and the first youth I'm going to introduce is Christine Buckner. Christine, are you on the line with us?
Yes.
Good. I want to let you tell you a little bit about Christine. She is a member of the National Advisory Board for the National Resource Center for In-Home Services. Christine's a senior at Northern Illinois University, and she's the mother of AJ, who is now 3 years old. Christine was in foster care from the ages of 15 until 21, and she became a mother when she was 18. She received services from the Illinois Teen Parent Services Network, and recently just finished up an internship. She was selected for an internship in a competitive process with UCAN, which is a Chicago agency which oversees Illinois' statewide Teen Parenting Services Network. So she brings a perspective both as a mother in the system, as a foster youth, and also as someone who's worked a little bit now on the services side. So I'd like to thank you, Christine, for participating in this webinar. And if you'd like now to just share your story about someone who became a parent while she was in foster care.
Okay. Well, first, I found out I was pregnant when I was 18 years old. It was my first weekend away in college, and of course, the first feeling is I was scared. I did not know what to do. When I did inform, I told my caseworker he was a male, so I did not speak with him. I spoke with his supervisor, who was a woman, because I felt more comfortable talking to her about it and thought she could relate more to it. And I was not informed of all of my options at first of what I could do. And so I did have my son. When I was in the teen, I switched different agencies when I became pregnant. I went into the teen parenting program. Financially-wise, they helped a lot. They brought all my son's initial things, such as cribs, car seat, stroller, diapers, toys, clothes, and they also gave me a stipend every month for him as well. They provided other services because I was not used to being around kids. There are no kids in our family, so I've never been around babies. And they did provide a parenting coach who would come see me twice a week. There were good and bad things about the parenting coach. I would say, for one, it was kind of bad because she did not have children. So to me, and she was right out of college, and so everything that she taught me basically was from a book. It wasn't from, her own personal experience. So for me personally, it was hard for me to relate to her because I just felt she was just teaching me out of a book, and basically, like, it wasn't like that in real life, dealing with just like discipline and just teaching my son different things, playing with him, getting used to having a baby and being a mother. Some of the good things was, it was nice to have somebody come in twice a week and work with me and my son. That was nice. And some of the things did help out. They also provided a therapist. And the therapist was just for me because I did have postpartum depression after I had my son. And that was, I think the therapist helped the most. She would come in. She did not have to, but she did. She worked with me and my son. She did activities with us, like cooking, just playing, different games we could do, different ways to help him. He was colicky as a baby, so just different ways to help, reduce my stress as well as my son's stress, and to help with that. That helped a lot. And then I think those were the services that I received with the teen parenting program.
Mm-hmm. Good. Is there anything? I'm trying to look at think of things we talked about. I think. Is there anything that would have helped more? I think maybe that would be the last question.
Okay. Yes. One thing that really helped, I think, was just the support system. The program I was in, my caseworkers, they, I guess I couldn't really relate to them all that much. My previous caseworkers that I had before I switched into the teen parenting program, they were really supportive. That's one thing that just really helped because they supported my decisions. They listened to my thoughts and my opinions, as a parent, because I was the one that had to deal with my child,
mm-hmm.
deal with my child every day. So I really appreciated that, just the support system. Even if they did not agree with what I was saying, they still valued my opinion. And I think that's one thing that, as a parent, especially a teen parent, like, you're going to make mistakes along the way. But the problem with the teen parenting program, what they did, they were quick to label certain things and stigmatize things in a bad way. And they were very quick to call DCFS on you. And I personally did not like that because I felt like if we're going to be in, like, it's kind of a relationship, me and my caseworkers, so we should talk about stuff first.
Mm-hmm.
Be more open. And, if you're going to call DCFS, maybe give the person a warning ahead of time, like, I'm going to call because of this. So then maybe we can both sit down and figure out a way to work things out to make it better. But
Right.
just really listen to the mother's opinion because at the end of the day, she's the one that has to deal with it, not the caseworker.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. We have a question. What program you were involved in?
I was in Omni Youth Services. They're one of UCAN is in charge of that program, I know.
So that's UCAN is acronym.
Yes.
That's actually their agency name, and it's if you want to Google Illinois Teen Parent Services Network. If you look at the resource guide that we've provided on the NRC for In-Home Services website, and that we emailed to registrants, under Comprehensive Services, you'll see a link to that Teen Parenting Services Network site, and I'll come back and talk a little bit more about their structure in a minute. A question for Christine. Do you think a life coach would have helped give you extra support, and how much time did you have in your help in your house by the week?
A life support, that would have been nice because I was in school at the time, so it was kind of difficult, just juggling school, work, and a new baby, and just, of course, other issues in life.
Yeah.
A life coach, I think that would have definitely helped. My parenting coach, she came in. We spent about an hour, twice a week. And then my therapist, she came for like an hour a week.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Christine. And now Clay is going to introduce our other former youth participant, Stephanie.
I am. I'm going to introduce Stephanie Vasquez. She's one as well, an outstanding young lady. Who's raising her son. She is currently in school at Truman College, majoring in nursing, and she, too, is a star intern at UCAN. So, Stephanie?
Yes.
Are you there?
I'm here.
You want to talk a little bit about your experience and the support you had and where you are now?
Well, I've been through different DCFS agencies since I was 8 years old. Experience with the regular DCFS was not as well as I wish it was. I I could say that once I went into my own apartment, which was the independent living program, I felt more comfortable staying by myself instead of staying with a foster parent. I could also say that my old caseworkers were not really much of a supportive type of caseworkers when I was with these regular DCFS. What really disturbed me about them was that they really didn't offer the schedule to come see me when I had the time. They wanted to come at the time that they wanted, and they would not even call before they went to the house. They just show up at any time whenever they wanted, whatever day they wanted. Once I came into the Teen Parenting Services with UCAN, I had more support, more help. They will help me out with any resources that I needed based on information with the WIC or information on how to, what different things I needed to know about my son's growing development. I did go through tough times, and my parenting coach, my mentor, were able to be there to give me all the support that I needed, and just let me know that I'm a great person and that I could keep doing what I want to be in the future and be a good mother to my son.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have a question for both Christine and Stephanie. Maybe we'll start with you, Stephanie. What tips do you have for a worker to sort of, first of all, encourage a young woman who is pregnant to be able to feel comfortable to tell someone, tell her caseworker, and then also how does a good worker, engage a parent? How does he sort of develop that trust and encourage a young mom or dad to get involved in services?
I would say that in a way to be encouraged to be able to let them know the situation I was going through and with that I was pregnant was really the one person that will actually sit there and talk to me and give me advice and tell me everything will be my old foster mom. She will always encourage me, and then she will always tell me that if I needed to talk to them and I was afraid to talk to them, that she would sit there next to me and talk with me. Caseworkers really weren't, they were understanding, but I believe that not understanding enough to know where a foster child was coming from. And then they will just try to talk to you, like try to let you know that everything was well, when really everything that you were trying were not really they were not really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I will always let them know that I needed the help, and they were not helping me. That's why I say that once I went into UCAN, I had more support. I had people who would actually call me and tell me if what days they were able to see me and everything. They will actually come to me and give me a good advice. If I asked them a question, they had an answer right away for everything I asked.
Great. Thank you for that. Christine, any advice for encouraging caseworkers on how to work with young moms?
Yes. I would say, for one, be honest. From my experience, a lot of times, I don't know a better word, but they like to sugarcoat things, and like that really doesn't help, because like one day you have to face reality about certain things. So it'd be nice if they can just be honest with you. It's going to be hard raising a child. So if they can just, be honest. And another thing is listen to their opinion. Listen to the mother's opinions. I've noticed when I was working at UCAN, one problem was I noticed a lot of caseworkers, they talk about the clients openly, but as a client, when you come in and you hear them talking about other people, then you will automatically assume they talk about you as well. So if that confidentiality could be, really valued and important, because people don't everybody does not want to share all their business with everybody, and that can be embarrassing for some people. And really listening to the mother.
Listening to the mom. We have a question from the panel, the audience, about whether you had any support or if you wanted to engage the father of your children.
At the time, he was in his son's life. Just because of his background, they did not care for him, so they did not want him around. Mm-hmm. So to be honest, they really wanted to exclude him out of everything, actually.
Okay. And I guess the last question was whether did you feel you both were served by the same Teen Parenting Network. Did you feel like you had a team, or were people talking to each other, or were you kind of having to do all that yourself, get people on the same page?
You know what? I'm so sorry. Your last question, I was thinking of something. It just came back to me.
Okay, go ahead.
One thing that would be really nice with caseworkers is if they can get the supervisor's number from the start, because I know a lot of teen parents, they say they can't get a hold of their caseworkers or they're having issues. So it would be nice if they know who they can go to, because sometimes some people don't know who to go to or they don't know the right numbers. So it would be nice if they had the supervisor's number as well. The office, they don't have to have the cell phone number, but the office number would be nice. So if there ever is an issue or miscommunication, it could be handled right away.
Yeah. Well, that's a good answer to the question of a team. It's nice to have more than one person in your court, right?
Right.
Yeah. Stephanie, did you have anything, last thing you wanted to say?
Can you rephrase that last question, please?
Did you feel like you had a team working on your behalf? Did the people who came in and out of your house, did they know what each other was doing? Did you ever have a meeting together, or did you get the sense that things were going in different directions?
At the beginning, I believe everything was like, I was kind of like a weird, like things were not well put together. But once things had passed by and everything was getting organized, I did feel that I was with a team who was really trying to help out.
Great. Well, thank you both for sharing your perspective and your experience. It's really very, very helpful to us as we think about how to move forward to help more young people who are in care. And best of luck to you.
Thank you.
All right. We've got 15 minutes to cover the rest of the material, and I promised my organizer I'm going to speak fast. What are the general policy and practice challenges? Sort of big picture. Teen parents obviously need to transition to adulthood. Whether or not there's formal jurisdiction over the children of youth in care, it's really quite clear on the child welfare side that there's a lot we have to assure the safety of the children of the youth in care and promote the well-being of them. And at the same time, respecting parental autonomy to the greatest extent possible, because most of these children are not, in fact, in foster care. And that the entire community concern, not just child welfare, but everyone, is that we're supporting the development of healthy families. We know that these families start at risk, and we want to connect them to family and community support, not only while they're in care, but as they transition out of care. I'm going to just sort of confess to you that I had an aha moment, and I had that aha moment after the PowerPoint was PDF'd and sent on its way to you. So what I want to say is that, as Cynthia mentioned, I came from Illinois. I interviewed several people from Illinois, and Illinois started their youth services a long time ago and did it pretty much as a child welfare system. But things are actually quite different now. I think that we know a lot more about what works in evidence-based home visiting. Both the Chafee Law and Fostering Connections have supported the work that child welfare agencies are doing to transition youth. We have things like homeless and runaway programs, there's a lot more going on, I think, that can be built on. So as I talk about policy and practice issue for states, I'm going to already just sort of apologize if I sound like I'm coming too much from the child welfare perspective, because this really this can go a lot faster and be a lot easier, I think. Not that collaboration's easy, but there's a lot more resources that we can bring to bear now on this issue, as you've seen. When I asked the folks in Illinois who've been working on this for 20 years, where do you start? What they said was you need a commitment to the basic rights of pregnant and parenting teens. The right of the teens to be able to continue their services even though they've now become parents, the right to additional services, the right to live with a child, the right to supportive housing, to continue their education, the right of this new family to extended family support, to rethink. I mean, I think we all are rethinking with fostering connections. Even if a young person's in care, they still have a right to their extended family support. It's absolutely critical for this new family. And this is something that involves all of us here, that pregnant and parenting teens in care are entitled to no less support than other at-risk families in the community. Simply being a part of the foster care system should not disqualify families from getting all the other services that we've been developing for at-risk families. Another really important piece is to provide information to all teens in care about their rights and responsibilities around pregnancy, reproductive health, and early parenting. We heard, Christine gave an example of how difficult it was to tell the caseworker that she was expecting. Here she was off in college, and it was a time that was really hard to say. And if you look at the numbers of late prenatal care, what we want to do is encourage teens to ask for help as soon as they find out they're pregnant. And that means, I'm assuming, having good information about what their rights are. Because all those youth who are in care have had the experience of child welfare, child protection in their lives. And it would be natural for them to be afraid that that child would automatically go into care and face some of the same issues they did. So knowing that that's not the case, having those discussions with teens around pregnancy prevention, but also what happens if that isn't the case. And boys, and move to the next slide, but young men are certainly underreported in this system. It's not going to be obvious that a young man's expecting a baby in the 4th, 5th month, but they have a right to services too. So early identification is a really important policy and practice issue in order to get prenatal care started, to discuss pregnancy options, and then to begin to revise those case plans, transition plans, revise education plans, and to prepare for a possible placement change, because that's just a reality. Not all placements, whether it's a group care setting or a foster care setting, is going to be able to be viable after the baby is born. So the next question is deciding what special services will be offered, and we've talked quite a bit about these things. And so this is where I had my child welfare hat on, but I want to take that off and say this, why can't this be a community decision or a cross-agency decision? What's available in our community? I mean, all of us are facing budget cuts. When we think about expanding services, the first place obviously ought to be making connections and using the services that are already available in the community. When we do technical assistance with states, that's the first place we ask. What do you have now? What strengths do you already have in your system that you could work with? One thing I'll mention is the bottom of this slide on the left-hand side is quality child care and early childhood education. We've all been aware that there's the Strengthening Families approach to bring child welfare and quality early childhood education together is really taking off. Certainly early childhood education and early intervention is both excellent for children and involves parents naturally in their communities through activities. The policy, I want to know, if you're a state agency and you're looking for a good policy, I would strongly recommend you look at the Illinois DCFS policy. When you look at your PowerPoint, you'll be able to click right into that. It's really comprehensive. I can see my my organizers pushing me to go, so I'm going to mention one of the key issues is linking teen parents to nutritional support, health insurance, financial assistance, and getting everybody to sort of think about this family now as a unit. And so really the family-centered approach. And I particularly want to mention fathers. And I want to say we're going to have an entire webinar at the end of November, November 30th, just looking at teen fathers. We're going to bring you some innovative ideas about how to work with teen fathers. And not necessarily teen fathers who have custody of their kids. But it's also really important and difficult, I think, to figure out how to engage fathers who are not in the child welfare system as well as their extended family. I will say I once did a focus group around fathers, and we had someone from the Teen Parent Service Network who said she had 90% of the fathers were involved on the caseload of her teen moms. And we asked her how she did it, and she said as soon as she found out that the mother was pregnant, she went to the grandmother, the paternal grandmother, the mother of the boy, and his sisters, and said, when are we planning the baby shower? Got right involved in trying to figure out the extended family connection. And then I think this is really a child welfare issue. When child maltreatment occurs, these young families are entitled to the same reasonable efforts to prevent removal. And if a child has to be removed, then there needs to be a reunification plan. Just a couple of issues before we open it up to a little bit of questions. Delivering the services, obviously the best way would be some memoranda of understanding and collaboration. But there are some specialized child welfare services that probably need to be worked on. And our next webinar in November 3rd, I believe, we'll have a representative from the Illinois Teen Parent Service Network who will be able to talk to you about how they pulled that together. The workforce issues are very similar to what states are already looking at in terms of transitioning. You might not have a large population of pregnant teens in any one area, but nevertheless you've got to figure out how to train workers to deliver those kind of services and to help them understand their new role, that they're not in this, that they need to treat this family in a family-centered way. So those are issues that need to be addressed, and some states, for example, are thinking about doing more specialized training and certification for workers on the teen issues. And then I think that, again, bringing in family support and evidence-based home visiting programs where people have that kind of expertise to engage families. And that's so much more efficient than trying to create a service for maybe a handful of young people in a rural area that they could participate in a service that's already there. Placements change. We know that. Maintaining service linkages are very important. And then developing a data system. This is really a systems issue. If states are going to tackle tracking or providing good services to pregnant and parenting teens, they need to have a way to collect data and monitor their progress. And the last slide I want to mention here is that, again, Illinois leading the way. They've created something called the New Birth Assessment. We will link that to our website. We don't have that there right yet, but within 60 days of birth of a child, 60 days of finding out that someone's pregnant, they start this process. They're going to assess concrete needs, links the family to resources. You can see all the things they're doing, and assessing safety and risk. And they're administering 2 evidence-based assessments. The Adolescent Adult Parenting Inventory by Bavalek looks at the parenting skills, and the Adolescent Needs and Strengths is a outcomes management system that's being used. And all this is going into a statewide database, not only to track individual family progress, but also systems progress. We've mentioned our resources. If you go to the website or you click on this PowerPoint you've gotten, we have really a very detailed annotated bibliography of resources that will talk about a lot of the things that we brought up in the webinar. In addition, we can provide technical assistance to states and tribes looking to improve services. All of us have technical assistance roles. We can facilitate peer-to-peer learning. If you need access to training, curricula, or trainers, all of our resource centers know about this stuff, and all of our websites provide information resources. So these are the kind of things that going forward we'll be looking at ways to do joint technical assistance if we get those kinds of requests. We just have a few minutes left, but either maybe we should open the lines for questions from the audience.
To the phone audience at this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. When you press *1, you will be prompted to record your first and last name. Again, *1 for any questions at this time. And again, that's *1 for any questions or comments.
While we're waiting, do you have some questions?
Yeah, we do. We'll take our first phone question.
Daphne Billingsley. Hi. My question was if the youth are still available or for any staff who are working with pregnant or parenting teens, while they're being supported in developing their own parenting skills, is there any encouragement or engagement of biological family members of the young adult parent, either on the paternal side or the maternal side, grandparents, aunts, not necessarily for placement, but just for long-term support of a family member?
All right. I don't know if our youth are still with us. Clay, do you have anything you want to mention about that?
Can you repeat that question?
Really, I was just wondering if in this program, if part of the design, because we want to make sure that youth who exit care have some kind of caring adult long-term connection, if a parenting or pregnant youth has some support to maybe reconnect with some biological family member or even the members on the paternal side of the infant child for not necessarily placement but just long-term support, if there's any kind of diligent search or assessment of the appropriateness of that.
Well, the thing about that is, and this is how it is in most states, there's not really anything that prohibits them from connecting back with either their own family or the extended family of the child. And one of the things we try to promote in all that is that those young adults do identify those permanent connections and make that. And most of the time, whether that be fictive kin or extended family, it's really up to them. Unfortunately, because of the services and the system, a lot of times those relationships are so damaged that that doesn't happen in a very positive way. I don't know specifically of any programs that basically require or enforce that any more than other than it's up to the youth to identify, and then they can help establish. Some we've seen good plans for doing that, and some we've seen bad.
This is Lisa. The Fostering Connections grantees, though, are really working on. There's a number of demonstration projects around the country that are looking at ways to connect to not only biological parents but extended kin. So I think we'll be getting more and more information from those projects about creative ways to do that. And it's certainly true from the research we know that the great majority of young people out of care are reconnected and do have contact with their biological families.
And I guess I just mentioned that because one of the young ladies mentioned well, she kind of implied that the father of her child, it really wasn't encouraged that she have any real contact with him, but maybe he had relatives that were safe or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Operator, do we have any other questions on the line?
Yes, we'll take our next question.
Mara Ziegler. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, this is Mara. Can people hear me?
Yes.
I have a practical question. How will we be able to access the PowerPoint, the very wonderful PowerPoint from today?
I'm going to take you to a slide on the, if you will go to the website for the NRC for in-home services, which is listed on the slide right now, we will have, you can pull up the entire PowerPoint. So I guess that's funny. Look at the PowerPoint to get the link to use it. But if you also just Google NRC for in-home services or NRC in-home, it'll be right on the front page, a link for you to get in.
Okay, but this NRC in-home.socialwork.iowa.edu, that's
yes,
today.
That'll get you right there.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take our next question.
Gina Cardina. Hi, everyone. This is Gina. I actually have two questions. I have one that's a technical question. Is there going to be a training certificate available for today?
You know, we had not talked about that. And usually, at least on our side, we need to apply for that in advance. So it might end up being for the next two. But that's a good question. We can send information about that on the. Are you registered, Dina?
Yes, I am.
All right, we'll send information on that and see what we can do. So
okay.
We won't be able to do retroactive, but we might be able to do our package. Join us for the next two. So.
Okay. The reason that I asked is because I need to turn this in for my internship, and I need to have a documentation of the 1.5 hours.
Okay. Why don't you email me?
Send me like a confirmation email.
Yeah. Why don't you email me? The last slide on this presentation has email addresses. If you email us, we'll help you with that.
Okay, great. And then my second question was, I heard several people talk about care up to like 21, 22, and I was wondering if that's a state thing, because in Florida here, actually, when I was the one that asked the life coach questions, one of the youth, because I was life coaching a while ago, and our youth at 18, whether they have children or not, they are exited from care. They have a transition plan, but they are exited from care. There's no additional options. So I was wondering if that's a state thing or a federal thing.
Clay, you want to tackle that one, or?
Well, and I'll say, as Clay gets ready, on the runaway and homeless youth side of the House, our legislation, federal legislation, specifically says our transitional living programs are for youth up to the age of 22. So that takes care of the non-systems involved youth, and I'll let Clay speak to Chafee legislation.
And what we're currently looking at is up to 21, and certain states also go on beyond 21. There are states that have actually provided services and whatnot to youth up to the age of 24. So although we are looking at services under Chafee to 21, like I said, some states have gone beyond that.
So it's a state option, though. The state does not have to accept that, and that's one of the issues probably that you're facing.
Correct.
So if a state wants to increase the age, they can do so. Illinois happened to be one of those states who had foster care till 21 a long time ago. So
one of the hookups about extending foster care to 21 is you've also got to do your adoption and your guardianship. So that delays a lot of states from doing it as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I know we're running over the time. Are there any other questions that?
We have two more questions.
Okay, we're happy to stay with you as long as you're happy to stay with us. I will say, for those of you who need to get off, I want to thank you very much for participating. We're leaving a slide up here that has upcoming webinars. I'm going to switch now to all of our contact information in case you want to take that down and contact one of us for more information. Thank you very much. And go ahead with the next question.
All right, we'll take our next question.
Marco Torres.
Go ahead.
Are there any resources available here in California? I'm calling from Riverside County Department of Public Health.
Why don't we, if you would be willing to email one of us, we would work on that with you.
Okay.
Be very happy to have you email Lisa Diano, and then I'll refer that off to our other colleagues. So,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll take our next question.
Kathy Putnam. Yes, this is Kathy. There's an adolescent parenting program in our state. Very few of those teen parents are in foster care now. However, there are several that are in very unsafe home situations, and some, in fact, quite literally, that are homeless. But it's difficult to get some county DSSs to take custody of a teen at age 14, 15, 16.
Yeah. I suppose that would be where the would that work better for the homeless youth then? Does that?
Yeah, the Runaway and Homeless Youth programs, our basic center programs are for youth under the age of 18. There's no lower age, so anyone under 17 years and 364 days and under are basic center children, youth eligible. And other kids that are couch surfing, staying from friend to friend, doing a pay to stay, or what our young people usually call abandonments. A lot of our young people are living in abandoned homes or homes that are certified by the county and or state as uninhabitable by humans because they don't have running water, they don't have plumbing. All of those young people are eligible for our services. And it takes time to build that trust level up, as you guys know, to have those young people trust us enough to come into our shelter and trust that we're not, our goal is not to separate them from their child. So we have to work diligently to make sure that we meet them where they are and provide the services that they ask for at that time until they're ready to accept more services that we could offer, and that could include shelter.
Thank you. Would they be eligible for, you had mentioned 37 maternity group homes. Was that under Runaway and Homeless Youth?
Yes, ma'am. Those are funded through Family and Youth Services Bureau. Okay. And there's 37 specifically maternity group homes across the country, and there's an additional 225 transitional living programs, and a lot of those also serve pregnant parenting youth. So if you have a young person, we on our website at the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and TA Center, we have a site that says which programs. You can click on a link and say California or Oregon or wherever, and it'll give you a list of the programs that are there. Or you can just email me, and I will find the programs for you that are in your state or in your local area. We don't have enough. There's more need. There's more demand than there are beds. But our programs do everything they can to make sure those young people are as safe as they can be until we can get them into a program.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Lisa. Another thing I think sometimes is judges have these policies, but they don't know now what's possible. I mean, if it might be worth an education campaign for the judges in your jurisdiction, especially if your state is developing services, because so many more things are available now in the way of ongoing aftercare and support for teens. They may not know about that. I think it'd be well worth educating.
I think that's true, and I think some of it is really just reduced to some of the funding, the difficult funding that the local social services are finding themselves in.
Yeah.
Because if they have more kids come into foster care, that is a drain on their system. It's not all federal money, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct, right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there? Do we have any more questions on board?
Yes, we'll take our next question.
Go ahead. Hello?
Caller, your line is open. Please go ahead with your question. And hearing no response, we have no further questions.
Okay. I would, before, Cynthia, I know you want to close us out. I want to say one thing. We will type up all the questions that came on the presentation and try to make answers and send those out in an email to registered participants. Cynthia, you want to close us out?
I sure do. I just want to say on the behalf of the National Resource Center for In-Home Services, we want to thank you for joining today's webinar. If you have additional questions, the contact information for each of our partners is listed for your convenience. Additionally, we will send out a short online survey of this webinar. We hope you learned something new and that you will join us for the rest of this webinar series. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude today's conference call. We'd like to thank you all for your participation.